All right, let's go ahead and get started. So we are after episode 1, Mudcat. You have now finally received your next mission, your next step to be able to become who you want to become, whether that means going back to the void or something else to receive the testaments of Morir's cataclysm. Let's start at the very beginning when you get pulled out of your plane travel to find yourself in a swamp and you lose one of your most prideful points, which are your Italian shoes.
Yeah, the Italian leather boots, they're gone to the
I,
sludge.
as a DM, I consider this entirely successful based on that loss alone.
Yeah, it was interesting to just be in a swamp and it wasn't water, but it was water, and then it took my boots. It was a very like it's an interesting spot for like Vythorn to be in because he's obviously he's like on a quest. He's trying to get back to the void. He gets interrupted, obviously. Knows he's not where he's supposed to be. But he's also just kind of naturally curious, so there's also that kind of like, well, what the fuck is this shit?
Yes.
He really kind of like wanted to figure it out, but was like, no, I gotta keep going.
Yes. And I love that you did that, right? In this moment, I purposely kind of held back on the amount of information I wanted to give you. So that way you would have to start being much more active in it. And I know that's a lot of responsibility for a player, right? Like, what am I supposed to do? And you wear that burden a lot more as the only player as well. But the recognition of this moment was to put that onus on you, to say, you have to make a choice. And that was the initial and first part of the test that we'll call them the god of fate right now, right? That they were trying to see, how do you continue to make choices in this space, and what are the outcomes of these choices and how you react to these spaces. So you made the choice to say, like, I have still got to move forward. I have no idea where I am. I'm losing my favorite boots in this. And you still decided to hop in this boat and you're like, I'm going to propel myself forward using gust.
Yeah, I mean, well, he's like, there's not a lot of options. I mean, maybe it was a choice, but I don't really feel like for him. I mean, he thinks it's a choice. It's more of just I have a thing that I want to do. I got to keep moving. Standing here is not going to do anything. So at least moving forward is doing something.
But that's a choice, right? There's so much of us where we get stuck in that mud, that swampy nature initially hints at that, where we get stuck in decisions where it's like, I don't know where I am. How am I supposed to move forward? I don't know anything about this place, where we get stuck. And you just said, well, we're just going to try something. We're going to move in a direction. This looks viable. And you gave it a shot. And I think that's really important out of Vythorn to note his character decision to say, like, I just have to, like, he barrels forward.
Yeah, I think that it's kind of a mixture of like, well, he wants to know things. Yes. He's naturally kind of like curious and wants to understand everything about everything. But also, he's I think as he's gained power and knowledge, I think that he's probably, gained a little bit of even though he's been killed and just come back from the land of the dead, feels a little invincible at times.
Right.
Like he can't make a wrong choice. A lot of self-confidence.
When you're dead, what are the consequences?
Yeah. Well, even when he's alive, a lot of self-confidence and like, this is my choice, so I'm going.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And you made that choice to move forward. Now, it was interesting to me that when it came to these 3 crossings, you did a number of checks to like, okay, what do I see? Can I look for this? What makes it apparent to me? I think that was really smart. Again, part of it might be the fact that you're an Eagle Scout. And Vythorn certainly wasn't, but you do that even though Vythorn has no idea how to paddle a boat. And you made that choice because he's still a very analytical person in how he goes through his choice making. Like, there's a variety of ways of why we make choices. And that was the next step behind this. Why do you choose a certain pathway? And you were looking for reasons. You weren't just like, well, I'll just choose a random one.
Yeah, well, I mean, he even said that he was going to work smarter and not harder. Like, he
Mm-hmm.
said it out loud. That's the
Yeah.
way he's going to operate. He wants to, even if he's not the smartest person in the room, he wants to at least try to act like he is. So,
Sure.
like, you know, and he's a pretty smart individual. So, if you've got three
Mm-hmm.
paths and one of them is moving faster and has more visibility, like that just seems like a
Mm-hmm.
no-brainer,
Sure.
compared to the dark, creepy one that's moving slow. Like if he's in a hurry to get back to the void, the fastest path, with the most visibility it seems like the best choice.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I like that you did that choice, but oddly enough, unless if you had taken the center or left and you took the left, it ultimately wouldn't have mattered at all.
Pointless.
And technically,
Good.
if you had taken the right one just loops around, and he would have discovered that, and you'd get the chance to take the choice again. So ultimately, I guess I should say it didn't matter which choice you made at all.
Oh, that's interesting now thinking about that. If this is all some sort of like tests from the
Mhm,
gods of fate that want to
mhm.
see how he makes decisions, it's
Yes,
interesting that they didn't really give him one.
right. And that's also part of it, right? Now, if he had asked questions and whatnot, whether to the ink slime creature or to any of the fate personalities, you would have learned a little bit about that. Like, how did I get here? Right. And more of those details. Like, I want to know about this river. Why?
Mm-hmm.
What would have happened if I had taken one of the other pathways, any of them at any point? And that's okay. It wasn't primed to try to get into all of that back detail.
Yeah.
And it kind of hints at the idea is choice real? Because some individuals believe like it's providence. It's fate. Like we've heard that statement before, right? When we play like, oh, fate determined it. Right? It was always meant to be. Well, if it was always meant to be, then why does it matter what choices I make? And so it's kind of meant to showcase the complicatedness or how we don't really know the impacts of the decisions that we can make in that. Does it really matter? Now, that never occurred to Vythorn at all, which I think is also really important. Like, he sees himself as somebody who matters. His decisions matter, and he is at the helm of his own choices. I think that was fascinating in its own, even though it was an illusion of choice.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and like he does have that confidence, and I think he's just
Mhm.
resolved to, um, well, I mean, even jumping ahead, I guess to the end, um,
Yeah.
where we kind of get to the meat of what's really driving him is that we see a little bit about his backstory and stuff, and obviously he's somebody who has had fate happen to him in
Mhm.
certain aspects of his life, and so he's made it a point to try to control that, um, through knowledge. And
Yes. That strong determination of always trying to control things actually determined the outcome of how he needed to interact with the ink creature. At the time, I'll be honest, I had no idea how you were supposed to get out of it until it became apparent very clearly through, like, how you kept engaging it, like, you just wanted to force your way through this. You wanted to make sure that your will was enacted, and that kind of went with this theme of, again, does your choice matter? When do you get to make choices? How do we have choices? And so I wanted to put Vythorn in a position where he had to give in to somebody else's will.
Yeah.
Because he has to in other ways, right? Like, I mean, eventually, right? Like, he's given in to Elucia's will a number of times,
Yeah,
not always happily.
I think that's different though, because like
Mhm.
he gives in to her will, but at the end of the day, at least in his brain, he's the one who brought her back to the void. He's the one
Mhm.
who runs the logistics of the Dread Fortress, does the taxes and things. You know what I mean? She plays her part, he plays his part, and so
Yes.
in his brain they're equals.
Mhm.
Um, even if the titles don't reflect that, or it doesn't really matter if she, I think, feels that way. In his brain, he feels, at least contribution wise, that he has as much say in these things, or even if he doesn't, he can influence those things.
If I may offer an interpretation,
Sure.
as I hear you talk through it, it makes me think that perhaps he's okay with how Lucy makes decisions because he sees ownership even of the choices she makes. She gets to make any choice because he's given her the chance to make those choices, which is a very much so god of fate power.
He did hand her a kingdom, I guess, from his perspective.
He pulled together the armies that were there.
Yeah.
She only had to train them with her 3 individuals. She didn't have to go out and find them or rally them.
You know, and he opened the door to the Dreadfort, you know.
Yes.
I think, you know, I think he's obviously, I think he over, I don't know what the word is. He overinflates his importance in that matter, because obviously, you know, Lucia still had to lead the army and inspire the people, and she's the one who killed the Shadow King, and, you know, did most of the work there. And then you know, obviously he's not really you know, a super inspiring type necessarily, so
Yeah.
I think that, you know, obviously he's not going to admit that, but I think that, you know, she did plenty
Yes.
to earn that spot. But from his perspective, it's like, well, you know, I put all the pieces on the board.
Yes.
And you know, and then the game was played, but you know, I'm outside of it.
Yes. He's aware, but he isn't always as open with what his weaknesses are. That's also why I wanted to tap in and say, like, no one saw that you struggled with the paddle or that you didn't know how to swim.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's not only a vision of himself that he has, but he cares a lot about how others envision him and being seen as someone who is powerful and capable. Even if it's not front and center, at least those who are in power see him as powerful.
Yeah, I don't think that he necessarily is someone who needs that like recognition from everybody.
Sure.
It's more of like, you know, it's more of like when somebody's famous versus like when somebody's famous to famous people. You know what I mean? Like they're not
Yes.
known by everybody, but everybody who, you know, is knows about them. You know, they're kind of in the background, and so I think that's kind of the deal there with him, is like he doesn't have to be front and center in front of everything, because people that truly hold power understand that, you know, he is powerful and, you know, is in control of a number of things, I guess.
Yes. No, I think that's great, right? Like it's how he envisions himself. Now, here's another thing that I wanted to get at with a lot of the metaphor in the boat and the river. Maybe it was too metaphor. It's like, did the author mean to intend this? And I'm like, I did everything for a reason.
That's what authors always say.
Oh, yeah, everything. But even with the boat, right? As you're speeding through and you're kind of like, you're going through life so quickly, I wanted to make it that because you were going so much faster, your vision, which was resembled by that lantern, kept getting smaller and smaller because you were moving so fast and you weren't keeping your focus on that one thing. Your only goal was to move forward, not necessarily on how do I solve this the best way. And so I wanted that to be engulfed in it, and that it would eventually kind of snuff out your light in that end, and that you would lose that sight of where you needed to be.
Yeah, I think that's interesting because he, you know, I think from his perspective, you know, you say like, oh, you're solving it in this way that's maybe not ideal. You know, from his perspective, I don't think that he would. I think he makes decisions so easily because he can't conceive that his first instinct is not the best instinct. You know what I mean? Like he has got all this knowledge, he's studied, and he's you know, intelligent, and he puts a lot of trust in that. The fact that you know, his first instinct, you know, is probably the best one, and so he doesn't really second guess it.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
I'll be honest, personally, I feel like on the opposite end of that. But I admit, I also put a little of myself in there. Those individuals in the murky black liquid, that was very much so resembled by our ability when we become tired of making decisions and we feel exhausted from it. And we're kind of paralyzed and stuck in that space. We get attached to other people's goals and visions, and we're happy to support them, but we cannot see our own. And we kind of get pulled under. Part of it also feels a very tapped into depression.
Mm-hmm.
When it reminds me of like when I hit my lowest on those points where I felt like I couldn't move forward. It's just like, I don't want to make any more decisions. I don't care if it's the simplest decision of like, am I just going to be able to get myself McDonald's or Wendy's today? Which are not great choices at the bottom, but like you just give up and you stay there and you stay in the in between. You don't move forward. You don't, nothing happens. You just stay. And it's a weird, not necessarily death, but a lack of life in and of itself.
Yeah, that's interesting too, because I don't know that Vythorn would see it that way.
Yeah. He doesn't have that mentality at all.
No, because I think he would, he fought against it until it got to a point where it became clear logically that he wasn't gonna solve his problem that way.
Yes.
And obviously doing nothing is maybe not going to solve his problem either. Maybe he's just going to die. But there came a point where he exhausted some resources when he's like, well,
yeah. What's the worst? He's going to go back into the mirror.
I checked all of these boxes,
Yeah.
and so there must just not be an answer. It's just, I think that's from the intellectual point of view. Like, it's not like a, giving up or something necessarily. It's more of a, honestly, it's more of a, I solved for all of the potential variables, and this is just a trick question.
Yeah.
Like there is no answer. So I think he just, at least in my brain during that scene, it was more of a, less of a giving up and defeat, and more of a like this is the only thing that makes sense.
There wasn't a Caustic wrote a bad puzzle.
No, I don't think it was a bad puzzle.
I should just give up in this moment.
I thought it was really interesting because, and I thought it was interesting that his magic was working and it wasn't working because they were allowing it to work and then not allowing it to work. And so that's very confusing for him.
Yes.
Because obviously he doesn't understand all the rules of this place. And he's a person that is used to understanding all of the rules. Even in a new situation, like when he was in the Sands of Eternity, he very quickly understood the rules.
Yes.
But here he was having trouble. Like, I don't know. And even once we got into the conversations with the gods of fate, like, he just didn't know what they really wanted. He doesn't know the rules. So it was really just him, he's asking questions, but really it's him as he's looking around, looking at the books, and, kind of on the inside, the wheels are just turning. He's having this conversation with the gods of fate, but in the inside, he's having a whole different thought process of, trying to figure out any sort of clues that are like, where am I? What am I doing here? How can I get out? What are my options?
And that's an interesting thing in and of itself, that the gods were really trying to push for, is that you're so busy running forward that you are not really thinking about why. So that way, if this is the right choice. You're taking them one choice at a time, but you're not seeing the overall steps. If you take a small breath back and be like, what if I did things differently instead of just doing the reaction kind of gut punch running forward each time? Especially, this is different because, of course, in Vythorn's mind, one who can bend time itself, right? You think like, oh, he has been strategic, even like thinking about how cautious he was with the Shadow King. But for the Fates, who know such thing as time is irrelevant, especially in the purview of them, he's made such large risks that seem short-sighted in their opinion. And they see how all of these threads work together and how much he's sacrificed. And I think that's also an interesting point of it is Vythorn has really lost quite a bit.
Yeah, I don't think that he really considers it, to be honest.
Right.
I don't think that he looks backwards
Mm-hmm.
most of the time. And even in this the situation of like, they're telling him about, the Shadow King, and he was obviously having this large risk, but even still his brain is still like there wasn't really a risk, not a, because he's already in that mode of like,
Mm-hmm.
well, I checked all the boxes, so I mitigated all the risk that you can mitigate, you know,
Yes.
in a situation
Easy.
like this, like it just, he just feels a little infallible. Um,
Yeah.
and obviously he knows now that he was not infallible, but I think even in his, not that I know for sure, but I think even somewhere in his brain, even the Shadow King like breaking out is more of like a testament to the Shadow King's
Mm-hmm.
ability and not necessarily to his failure of, I think still in his brain he's like, well, I did what I could to make sure that didn't
Yeah.
happen, but the Shadow King's just it's the Shadow King.
Yeah.
Um,
He doesn't take that kind of responsibility. Like, it's not my fault, right? I did
yeah,
all that would be reasonable
yeah,
in that.
yeah. Yeah, and I think that he feels like that's good
Mhm.
enough. I do think it was interesting because like,
Mhm.
he always works even when he's not doing super shady shit. Like he works very much in the
Yeah.
shadows. Like he's the Grandmaster is the face of the Dread Fortress, and he is working behind the scenes um, on things, and
Mhm.
making sure things, at least from his perspective, making sure things don't fall apart. Um, that he's kind of in charge of all that stuff, and then
Yeah.
but at the same time, so I feel like he's not used to um, existing in the light. I guess you know what I mean. Like
Right.
not
But that's an
him saying like I want to be the god of fate. I don't think is
Mhm.
something he would be comfortable saying most of the times. Like he doesn't put his intentions out in the open very
Right.
often.
But I think that's also the hard part. He doesn't put it out in the open, but it's also challenging of how much does he put it out for himself, right? Does he like he has a feeling like, yes, this is what I want, but it's very different from when you really solidify, I want to be the god of fate. Like when you even say it to yourself in that
Mm-hmm.
moment. I don't think Vythorn has ever said out loud, I want to be the god of fate. He just justifies it. There's that secondary thought in the back of his head that he whispers or is hidden behind a door that that's what he wants, but on the front end he's still saying like, I want to have knowledge. I want to protect the void, right?
Yeah.
There's all of these there's this the story that he tells himself.
Yeah, I think it.
But
Oh,
but
go ahead.
that limits him, and that's what the gods of fate are getting at, or the gods god of fate is getting at, is that by telling these false narratives of himself, he's not going to get what he really wants.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting, especially if he does make it back to the
Mhm.
void.
Yeah.
Because he's operated in this way for he's really really old, thousands
Yeah.
of years.
A
So
baby for the god of fates.
yeah, so at this point, and that's part of his
True.
hubris too, is that he's really old.
Yeah.
Um, but
I know a lot of old people who think they know a lot.
right, exactly. Um, but I think it'll be interesting because now he's got to, having said that out loud, it's not really something he can ignore. He's kind of
Right.
made that resolve, and I honestly think it feeds right back into his proclivity to like go barreling straight forward. Now that he
Mhm.
has said it out loud, I think he's just still going to barrel straight forward, just at this new objective, which is more honest, I guess, more open.
Yeah.
And that'll be interesting if he does make it back to the void. into the Grandmaster, and
Mhm.
how does that, does he continue to keep those things out in the open, or or are those things going to be hidden
Mhm.
again?
Right. And how does he, if, in wielding this, right? If he gets all that the God of Fates offers him to be able to wield chaos and power, what will he do with that? What does that actually look like? Or will he go back to the same day to day that will probably not be enough to impress the God of Fates to go beyond?
Yeah, I mean, it'll be kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't, to be honest. Because
That's
if he doesn't do anything, then they'll be pissed, and if he does something, then they might be pissed, like, or happy either way. Like, it's either a situation where he's like not being honest or
mhm.
being too honest. You know, I don't know.
There's a lot to happen. I think that it's also interesting. You're very concerned of like what will be the consequences with the God of Fates and not with the acolytes, Doug, Lucia.
I know I am concerned with what happens with the
Yeah, we
Grandmaster
just won't
for
mention
sure.
them though. For
No.
sure. No,
I
there's a
said
second
I
thought.
said when he gets back to the Grandmaster and the Void.
Sure.
No, nobody cares about the acolytes. They're irrelevant. Um, but
Okay.
yeah, no, I think it'll be interesting. Like, especially now that he has stated this intention, can he go back?
Yeah.
To working under the Grandmaster. Really hard to be the God of Fate if you are, doing the taxes at the Dread Fortress.
Well, and that's the challenge, right? Like once you've said your intentions, do you break that promise to yourself?
Yeah, I guess it.
You don't have to answer any of this now. Like
No, I know. I
this is
like it.
like the setup and the exploration that we get to have
Yeah.
because of this what's now at the forefront of him, and he has to really decide and see that each choice that he makes is either a fulfillment towards his promise towards himself or promise towards something else that was not his original intention. And I think it's going to be very exciting to now see it from that perspective, that every choice that Vythorn makes from here on out, no pressure on you as the character player,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
You have to think about, what does this actually portray in helping him get his outcome that he's looking for? So that way the God of Fates will give him what he needs to join their ranks. Which, by the way, the God of Fates has a name.
Well, don't tell me yet.
Okay.
Or do you want to tell me now?
I'll tell you now because I really liked it.
Okay.
It's Philomena. Phil for short.
The God of Fate is named Phil.
Yes! Originally, I was going to go with Tamora, and then they go by Tim, but I thought that sounded a little bit too much like Monty Python and the Holy Grail.
Yeah.
Phil is a good
Phil's a good
choice, though.
name. Phil's a solid
Yeah.
name.
Phil and Fates. Very good Phil of Fates. It works well.
It'll be very interesting to see where this goes, because it obviously it has really big implications for the rest of our show.
Sure.
So
Sure. Did
you
you like the tone of the game though, and the pacing of it?
I really liked the tone of the pacing of it. I thought it was creepy.
I had a little funny moments too.
Yeah. I thought that was great. I thought it was just that it felt very. I remember at one point thinking this feels very like Vythorn is Alice in Wonderland
Yes.
esque.
Yes.
That's what it felt like. And I was just like,
Mm-hmm.
Him as a character, just very confused a lot, which is, I think very dismaying
Are
for
these
him.
people all on drugs here?
And he's just not used to. He's not used to not
Mhm.
getting answers. He's not used to, like, even when he was getting answers, they weren't really answers.
Yeah. And everyone's laughing at him.
Yeah, he's just like, I don't know that it's just more like a puzzle to him,
Yeah.
like, but not in a good way, and more of like a, it can't be solved because it doesn't make sense. It's not a fair puzzle.
Yeah. Yes.
So I don't know. It's super. It'll be. Yeah, I don't know how you put the God of Fate thing back in a box once you say it. There's like some things you can't unsay. you know. So and then why even with that, like, does he still want to go back to the void and save things? I suppose maybe just because of the fact that if he wants to be the god of fate, then he gets to decide the fate of the void. And that's that's what's being promised to him, I guess, is he gets that start of deciding some fate.
Yeah, we'll see how you start here. Where we go from there.
I'll be running this place in a week.
Maybe.
I
I like it. Thank you for letting me dive into more of Vythorn's background. It was interesting to get that beautiful picture of him as a child with burning hands in a burning home, right? There's a lot to unpack there. And then the choice to the decision making that you went through and justifying to keep the Shadow King, and even having echoes of familiar faces to see and remember how many people and relationships you've sacrificed along the way to get to where you are now.
I did think that was interesting. I didn't know if those characters were supposed to be characters that he did know, because, like, obviously the bear resembles Orin a good deal.
Yes.
And then shout out to Gitsy.
She has a very interesting story that got her there.
Yeah, I want to know how Gitsy became a god of fate.
There are a lot of things. The god, if I may share a little of the lore of the god of fates.
Yes, unless I'm not supposed to know it.
No, you can add. This won't impact the story at all. This is just like background in case people are curious. So Phil, once being one god of fate, right? She stood there as the singular one in the early eons, seeing life begin, offering whatever luck and intervention to help dreams come true. But over time, that gets boring, ultimately. And you see things go to waste, and you see dreams that fall apart, or things like, why would you ever dream of that? You're a monster, sort of thing. And so you really lose your connection and touch, and it becomes all arbitrary at that moment, right? There's good things, there's bad things. It doesn't matter. I'll intervene when I want to, because that's how these individuals, these creatures work, these mortals in this end. And so out of this boredom, to give Phil any reason to stay involved, Phil split himself and has pulled in multiple individuals and welcomes others to stay involved by bidding on these stories, choosing to intervene by pure luck or interest, whatever happens to catch the God of Fate's eyes, and how they can bet and determine what seems worthy to get their good graces.
That's interesting. I don't think I've ever been that bored.
Well, you've not lived forever. Well, not even lived. Again, they've been from the very beginning, and they will always be like that kind of level of deity, right? They are.
Mm-hmm.
Living and dying, those things mean nothing to them. The idea of wasted dreams, that means nothing to them. It is purely just this ability they have to play a part in helping them, because they are linked. They have, for whatever reason, some sort of general interest, and they know that is their responsibility, to be interested in these dreams, the goals, the futures that they have. And so as the god of fate, they have to stay attached to this. So this is how they are. Now they can at least play games with the fates that they are handed and pull those strings together and have voices to speak back and forth to, but ultimately they are one.
I like it.
Phil.
The one.
Phil. This chestnut-haired woman with big white wings.
I didn't know was she supposed to be reminiscent of the Grandmaster?
All of them are technically supposed to be reminiscent of favorite characters who have made very interesting choices on their end. They wear them like masks, costumes.
Interesting.
Which is also very interesting, because Gitsy was known to not take her own fate into her own hands, and she notably followed the dreams of others while she was alive in that story. I have other plans for her.
Oh,
But that is not the focus of this one.
this was good. You killed it.
Thank you.
It was a
Thank
very
you. Well,
very good tone. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was.
you were fantastic. Thank you for sharing more of Vythorn and playing the singular character while I threw some very random puzzles your way and you had to try to figure out how I'm supposed to move through this story.
It was good. It was perfect. It was perfect for, I just got to play purposefully dense.
Yeah, you're good at it.
Yeah, I know, right? I'm an expert.
Expert. Well, next time you will have some friends joining you, so it will be interesting and a new turn of events. Well, thank you all for joining us for this post-show recap as we dive into what we experienced, what we liked, and what this means for the D20 lore. Any last words, Vythorn Mudcat?
Suck it, nerds, and good night.
Good night.